My name's Carl Salberg, Creative Reproduction to Scale, and I'm going to show you how to hook up one of my working ceiling fans into the dollhouse. The first fan that I made was about '05, and I made it because I made a dollhouse of our cabin in northern Indiana, and every room in the cabin had a working ceiling fan, and I couldn't find one on the market. So I ended up designing my own. It took me about a year's time to perfect it and get it working. I actually have the first fan that I actually ever made is this fan, and ironically it still works. I was told that the motor that I'm using on here, which is a CPU motor from a computer, that I cut the fan blades off of it and just used the button in the center. I was told that it could not be slowed down to the point that I wanted it to work, and I spent quite a bit of time developing a speed control box that would slow that thing down and make it work right. I want to start with what we have today and show you how you need to hook it up into the dollhouse. When you get your fan, you're going to open it up, and I have this one to represent what I want to put into the dollhouse up here. It has the light fixture on the bottom, and of course it has the fan blades that are in here. It comes with 4 wires. 2 of them will be fine red and black wire, and those are the 2 wires that go to the motor. The other one is the lamp cord white wire, and it goes to the lamp. So you basically have just 2 wires for the fan, 2 wires for the light. And then we are going to connect them to the speed control board mounted into the dollhouse. The other 2 parts that come in here is the canopy and a down rod for mounting this. This down rod slides directly over the brass tube that's coming out of the fan motor, and that'll go inside that. So if we insert the wires through the stem on here, the other piece that's in here is just a simple switch, and that's to turn on and off the high speed on the fan. All of my fans come with 2 speeds. To switch it from one to the other, we can either use this on-off switch, and we'll show you how to connect that up, or we can use a remote control, and we're going to also connect a remote control into the dollhouse. The other thing that comes in the box is a set of instructions, and the first thing that it tells you to do is to test the unit. Well, I'm going to take our 9-volt tester, and we want to connect it first of all onto the lights to see that all of the bulbs light up. And I actually put LEDs into this one, so I have the ends marked with the red for positive, and the other one will take the black. And you can see that we've got all 3 LEDs are coming on. So we know that that's going to work. The second thing we want to make sure before we start wiring it into the dollhouse is that the fan itself works. And you have a red that goes to red, a black that goes to black, and we can see that, whoops, if I don't drop this on here and wrap the wires around it, that we've got the blades spinning rather fast. If you hold it the way it's going to be mounted, kind of feel and see if it has any bumps in it or if it's running very smoothly. This one's going very, very smoothly, so it's not going to vibrate or move out of the ceiling. I actually test them quite a bit before I mail them out to you, so they should work. And the ceiling fan is one thing that I pretty well guarantee anything on it, whether you break it or I broke it, or it got broken in shipping, I'll replace it for you. So don't be afraid to get this thing mounted into the dollhouse. Once it gets mounted, I have very few calls on they have been damaged. Very seldom have problems with the fan once it gets installed. If you are having problems, make sure you give me a call. I'll walk you through what needs to be done while you're hooking it up to the dollhouse. Pretty well, everything's going to get connected directly to the circuit board itself. 2 wires from the motor, the black and the red, are going to come over to this connector over here. This is marked at the top. It says fan, and you're going to connect the red wire into the holes on the front. So I would take the red wire, go on the red side where the red plunger is. I push it all the way in until it stops, then push the plunger down, and it'll go just a little bit further and give it a snug pull, and you'll see that it gets caught in there and makes a connection. The same with the black one. We're going to go into the other hole on the front of the plunger, push down that plunger, and then go all the way in. Give it a little bit of a tug to make sure that it's in there, and that's all you need to do to hook up the fan. On the other side, you have a series of terminal blocks, and the top one is power. So the power from the power supply is going to go into the first block that's on here. The second block is marked light. You can take the 2 wires coming from the light, the white ones, and screw them into the second terminal block that's on the board here, and it's marked light. But I normally hook it up anywhere in the dollhouse where you have 12 volts power. And if you want to switch the light separately, you can do that also by hooking it up into the dollhouse. You don't need to come down here. You can use this connection block for any light fixture that you want to wire. It's just live as long as the power to the dollhouse is on. The last one on here is the speed control. That's where the switch comes in handy, because we can wire or solder wire leads to the base of the switch and then just go into these 2 terminals, and when you turn the switch on, it shorts those 2 terminals and goes to high speed. The other thing you need to know are these 2 variable speed control units. They're marked R1 and R2. R2, the one on the bottom, controls the speed of the fan in the normal operation of the fan itself. When you go to high speed, this one controls the high speed side. So normally this one would be set a lot higher in speed than this one. Otherwise, they're very much the same thing. For the initial setup that you're going to have, you're going to be controlling it with the bottom variable resistor. The directions will tell you that you should turn this completely clockwise, which would take you to the highest speed before you hook it up, and then you can back it off and watch the fan slow down. Now we'll do that when we get into hooking it up into the dollhouse. I find that most people will hook this thing up on the low side of the speed control. They get it set up in there, and that's all they ever use. So they don't hook up the individual switch. Where it's used mostly is when you hook it up to the remote control. And we're going to hook the fan up with a remote control on here too, to show you exactly how that works. I'll show you one other thing is, where are you going to put the fan? I took a look at the dollhouse that we have behind me, and I originally thought that it would be nice to put it in the bedroom or whatever this room is going to be, and mount it in the ceiling here. But I thought it would be more interesting if we went up into the peak. So I'm going to mount it up into the top, because I get a lot of people that ask me, can you mount it up on the top side there when you have the angles of the roof that are in there. So we're going to hook the fan up into the top, and the way we do that is I cut a piece of wood and made it into a triangular cutting. The roof is at a 90-degree angle at the top, so I cut 45 degrees on both sides of this piece of wood, and it'll fit right up at the top here. So I made myself a beam that's going to go up in the top, and then we have to consider where the wires are going to go. If we had gone into this floor here, we're drilling a hole into the ceiling of this room and going to go all the way to the floor up above, and then we'll run our 4 wires from the floor to the control board or to the closest wiring for the light. And that's probably easier to do than to do it at the top here. But what I've decided to do is we'll run the wires directly back on the peak, and then I'm going to show you, I drilled a hole all the way in the back side, and I'm going to mount the board up in our tower up here, so that we need to put access of the 12 volts of the Dollhouse up into our tower, and we'll run through that and show you a little bit of that after we go ahead and put some leads onto the motor itself. So I'm going to come back here to my board here for working on. And as I said, we have the 4 wires that come out of the top of our fan. Just the white ones are for the light, and I cut a longer piece on here so that we can go up through the board all the way across the back side of the peak here, and then run it up into the tower. So we need quite a bit of wire to be attached to it here. To make things a little bit easier, I'm going to come back and I'm going to take our down rod that we have on here with the little canopy that's on here, and I want to mount it on the bottom edge of the beam that I made. And I've already measured the center point. I drilled a hole, which is a 3/32 drill hole, which is the diameter of this rod. And then I can put this directly into there. And this is how far down, if I turn it around that way, that our fan will be mounted from the ceiling. And you can make this distance any distance that you want. I should also mention that I have a flat collar now that I put on the top of the fans so that you can actually glue this collar directly to the ceiling. So you can make any of the fans that I make into a hugger, which is what that would do. Or if you have a greenhouse that you want to drop that down 4 or 5 inches, you just need to get a larger brass tube that you can put onto the top of the greenhouse and descend this as far as you want to go. So what I want to do first is I want to take this down rod and glue it into the beam that I've made that's on here. And since I already have the hole, I know where it's going to go. I'm going to put a little bit of glue in there and just push it in. And we'll let that set for a second or two. Now the fan is going to be mounted at the bottom of those tubes. And because we have such a long run, I'm going to go ahead and slide my wires into the tube. That's the white one first, and then the red and the black. This way I can line up the wires across here and get them out of the way for when I glue the beam into the ceiling there, and we'll have our fan already mounted. Now, as you can see, I can set that shaft directly inside. Now, I like to put just a tad bit of glue on that. By the way, the glue that I'm using is FiberFix Extreme. It's sometimes hard to find, but you can get it online. And I'm going to put just a hair, just a drop on that stem itself. If I want to remove that fan, I can break that loose. So I don't want a whole lot of glue. And then line this up and kind of turn it a little bit until we get it all the way down. And I'm going to set that to the side here. And we'll take our extended wire on the red and the black, or on the white light, and it doesn't make any difference which one I twist onto. I'm going to use my fingernails and pull this back. And because I have lots of room at on that peak side, I don't need to worry about how I twist these wires on here. So I'm going to do it the easiest way, is just grab the two wires and twist them together this way. And take these two and twist them. Now I'll take our soldering iron and we'll put the soldering iron on the bottom of the wire here, and I can just get it to flow and lock those twistings together. Put my second one over here. Come here. Grab my wire cutters, and I'm just going to snip the ends off. I would then put the liquid tape on that, and since I don't have it behind me, we'll put it on as soon as we stop the tape. But I would put the liquid tape on there to protect it. And I'll pull this back out again, and I'll bend over the leads going down on one side and going up on the other. And again, because this is LEDs, I need to determine on the end of the wire here which is negative and which is positive before we hook it up. So I'm going to separate the ends of the wire, and we'll get our 9-volt tester, and I'll just hook it up on one lead or the other. And by golly, I was lucky that time. The lights come on, so I know that this one is positive, and I need to get my red marker. I'll mark that one. I'll mark that one red. Now we'll take a cutting of the red and the black Kynar wire. I'm actually going to cut the ends of the wires at different lengths so that we won't have the two soldered connections lined up when we glue them onto the board. And because the Kynar wire is a lot harder to strip, I'm going to use our soldering trick and just put it down and pull the wire back underneath the soldering iron tip, and we've got that stripped. And then I'm going to take the red, and again we'll just do it the easiest way. Take my red to the red, and the black to the black. And again, we'll grab the soldering iron, put a little bit of solder on the tip of the soldering iron, and then heat the wires and introduce the solder again a little bit there. and we got that pretty well covered. We're going to trim that top off, and then we do the same thing on the red. And again, we'll trim this. We're going to go to the other end, and we're going to test it and make sure the fan works. Red on red. Hold that straight up, and lo and behold, our fan works. We left off with finishing up the beam that we are going to attach the light to. I went ahead and I glued the ceiling fan to the bottom of the beam, brought the wires up here. I found our liquid tape, applied them to the bare sections of the wire where I soldered on the additional run, and then I glued right to the peak along here. We can go ahead and we can solder this in place. You can see that I did drill a hole all the way at the peak at the top here, and I've started to feed the wires through. So let me go ahead and put a little bit of glue on our beam here. And I'm using the quick grip that's on here, and I'm just going to put a good line of glue all the way down on each side. And then I'll pull our wire all the way through from the back side. We'll just hold it there for a few minutes until that gets set, and then we can move on. The fan looks like it's positioned perpendicular, and we already tested it to make sure that it was going to work. And the next thing that we need to do is determine how the electricity is going to get up to the ceiling fan now that we've brought the wires to the back of the dollhouse. What we did earlier on another video is we ran the LED strips in the top here, and we grooved a channel all the way down the center post of the dollhouse to be able to provide electricity to each of those LED strips that we have in here. We're going to do basically the same thing for getting electricity all the way up to the tower. I took my router and I grooved all the way down to where I can get into what I call the basement. I then have, I drilled a hole at an angle so that I could connect the power strip on the bottom of the dollhouse, and I ran a wire all the way up here. And if I bring in the camera, you can see where I have gone from the edge of that side wall. I drilled at an angle to bring it up to the corner of the floor and the roof, and I've run my wire all the way back to the corner and continues up the wall of the tower that's in here, goes through this flat bed that's on here, and I can take this part off. And I've run the wires, a flat tape wire across from left to right on the top of the tower, and made my electrical connection of the wires right here. And I have already placed our speed control board in front and the remote control in the back area. And we'll wire that up a little bit later. The wires that I have that came through on the peak on here, I then routed out a section all the way down here, and then it comes up on this edge right there, and it'll feed up to the floor of the tower. So all I need to do is lay this in here, come around, and then up into the top of this, and we'll have our wires in place to be able to connect up to the two different circuit boards that we have. All right, now that we've got the wires run up to the tower, and I actually took the base from the tower and brought it down to my to the workbench down here. We've got the wires that are coming from the fan, so I have my white paired wire for the light and the red and the black that go to the fan motor itself. And we need to connect these to the speed control unit for the fan to be able to slow down to as slow as we want it to go. It's really pretty simple at this point. I'm going to take the fan motor wires and just bring them around to the front. And this is the wire connection block that the fan needs to be plugged into, and you simply need to put the red to the red and the black to the black. I'll take our wire cutters or strippers and go ahead and strip the end. I'll fold back half of it to give us a little bit more surface area to put into that block. And then we'll put the red in, and I put it into the front gate until it hits the gate. Push down on the red button, and then it'll go back just a little bit further. Give it a snug pull to make sure that it has caught the wire. Do the same thing with the black. Put it in until it touches the gate. Push down on the plunger. Go a little bit further back, and then give it a little bit of a tug to make sure that we're hooked up and in there. For the light, as I said, all we need to do is go directly to the electrical strip that we already wired in here, and we know that this is hot because I tested it with our meter to make sure that I had electricity coming into here. So I could just pull this back, strip the ends, and solder it directly to the tape wire right here. If we're going to be using the remote control for the light, we're going to want to connect it over to the remote control instead. We also have the connection on the bunch of blocks that are here. The second one is for the light, and we could connect the two wires into the gates on here, use our screwdriver, and tighten the wires in on this block. If all you have is this speed control, we can bring the wires over to here and put them into that second block here that's marked light. I'm going to ahead and leave the amount of wire that's on here, and we'll go ahead and connect it just to the closest run. Whatever is the closest run, this actually turns out to be the easiest for us to get to. So I would just go ahead and take our soldering iron, grab our solder, and I could go into a little bit of a circle, apply the solder into a little ball, hold it down on there a little bit until it just flows into a nice little bubble, a puddle. We'll do the red side. I'm scraping the mylar off. You can see how it flowed right onto the copper right away there. I got the copper hot enough for it to just flow right in there. We have our two little puddles. Now these are LEDs, so I needed to make sure that I had the red to red and the black to black going on here. And when we put them down there, then we're all set. So we've got the light on the ceiling fan hooked up to the power there. We need to connect the power on this board to the power over here. So I'm going to take another set of wires, strip the ends, fold back the stripped end, and we'll go to the one that's marked power. And on this corner of the board, you can see a little plus on it, and on the other side is a minus. So the red goes on to the plus side. It's going to go into the first gate that's in here. And I need to undo the screw a little bit, set that in there, and then screw this down. Again, give it a tug to make sure that it's in there and making a contact. Put this one in. And that needs to go to our strip that's live over here. So we'll make another set of puddles. On the black. And on the red. And then I would probably cut these back, and these are where they're going to be, so I will cut this back and then strip those differently. So let's go about there. And go ahead and strip the wire. If you notice, I give it a little bit of a twist and then pull. That cuts the insulation real well. Fold back the stripped end of the wire. Then the old story, red to red and black to black. So we'll come over here, red to red. Put the iron on top of the wire and just melt it into the puddle. Let it set for a second until it solidifies. Bring the black to black. And our board is hooked up, so we're getting electricity to the board. We've got the wires from the fan hooked up on the fan port, and we have our light, actually, we wired to the closest power source. So the light will work. Then we can turn on our power to the dollhouse. We can adjust the speed of the fan with these two dials that are on there, and we're going to do that after I put this back up on top of the tower. I'll mention also, which I didn't mention earlier, this is the jumper that's on here, and I have it set on the lower side, so our fan will go the lowest on here. I normally preset this before I send it out to you. So you probably don't have to move this, but if you want, we're having problems with the fan going too slow or not being able to go slow enough, you can pull off the jumper and put it on the opposite two pins. So if you can see it, I went from this pin and the center pin and moved it up to the top two pins. It actually works best on this fan that we have on the lower two pins. Before we start wiring the remote control, there were two things that I wanted to mention about the speed control board. The speed control board and the remote control, I have mounted onto the board here with double stick adhesive tape. The remote control, when you get it, has a cover that's on it. I usually just take the cover off, throw the cover away, and then I'll take the foam tape and put a couple strips on the back of this, stick it down into place where we want it on the board. And it works really well. Instead of screwing the thing down or anything else, it stays in position, yet you can take it up if you needed to at another time. The other thing we forgot to do is on the speed control board is to hook up the switch that comes in the package also for going to high speed. I've gone ahead and drilled two holes in the base here, and I can mount the push button, on-off push button, into those two holes. What we need to do is to solder a wire on each of these lugs that are on each side of it. I did this one in advance Then I can go ahead and glue that into place. Just put some glue on there and put the 2 metal pins into those holes and push that down. And then the connection block here, the end one, which is marked speed, is to go to the high speed on the fan. And I just take one of these leads and go to one of the holes on the side here for this bottom block, and then put the other wire in the other one. And when you push the button and short out that terminal, it's going to switch you to the high speed on the fan. So we can go ahead and cut these back a little bit. And let's strip them. Strip that one. Fold the stripped wire over on itself. Take our screwdriver, open up the gate on our block. Then just take one side, go all the way into the gate and turn the screw down onto the wire. Give a little tug, make sure that's tight. Put this one in the other hole. Make sure we're tight. Now, when we turn the fan on and it's running, when I hit the switch, it'll automatically go to the high speed. Hit it again, and it'll go back down to the low speed that's on there. So now we want to take the wires that came from the fan and utilize the remote control to operate the fan. The first thing we want to do is we want to power this board. So we're going to take a red and a black wire. And if we read the edge of the board here, this has 12 volts on it, and this has ground. The first two screw here holes are for the 12 volts of the Dollhouse that we want to connect to the remote control. A red will be the 12 volt terminal that's on there. So we'll take our screwdriver, unscrew the screw a little bit, and we folded back the end of the wire on here. Put it into the front hole, tighten our screw down, and then take the black lead, put it in the first position, make sure it gets underneath the screw or the gate that's on there. Tighten it down, give it a little tug, make sure that it's tight. And we're going to wire it to the flat tape run, which we know is live. And again, we follow the red to red and the black to black. And I'll take the red wire and go down to the flat tape, solder it in. Take the black wire. So now the board is powered. The next three screws are for channel 1 or A on the remote control. We said that we wanted to turn the light on with A, so this will be the first one that we'll work on, where we wired it directly to the flat tape here. we're going to come up and we're going to connect it to the remote control instead. But I only need one side. So we want to take the positive side. I'm going to unsolder it from where we had it before. And we're going to bring it up here to the third position. 1, 2, 3. I'll loosen the screw. Now the only other thing we have to do is we have to take a red wire and bring the positive that was connected over here originally. We're going to go through the switch so that when we hit button A on the remote control, it's going to throw the live wire over to this terminal and turn the light on. So we need a short piece of red wire. And we're going to go into the center position. Again, give it a tug and make sure that it works. And then fold over the stripped end here. And we'll go right down here. Solder that in place. Come on. That's the A button. The B button was to turn the fan on itself. And what we need to do there is to go get the power connection that's over on the speed control board and just take off the red wire. We'll put that on the common. And then we'll take another red wire and we'll go from the normally open so that when we push button B, it will close that red wire there and bring it over to the speed control board. So we'll take another wire that I've stripped here. And we'll go in the last hole and bring it back over where we took the red wire off of the power connection. And if this is getting confusing to you, it does come with instructions that I think are pretty clear, but then I wrote them. We'll push that back into the gate opening on the front side and screw down tight. And now we have the speed control is being operated by button B, so that when you hit B on the remote control, it's going to turn this board on. The last one that we have to connect is we want the high speed to be able to be activated by the remote control. So I have to disconnect the button that we put in here if you're going to manually do it without a remote control. So we'll throw those wires over there. So I'm going to grab two wires, fold over the ends, and we're going to connect those back onto the speed terminal. Take our second one. Now we're going to bring those over to the connection block, and we want to put it on the two that are normally open so that when we hit the button, it will close the circuit. Now we'll bring the one to the third terminal set, which is these three screws that are here. Again, the center is going to be the common, so I'll put one of them on the common. And take the second one, and it's going to go over to the normally open and screw that down. Now we have the remote control completely wired up. I tend to like to organize my wires a little bit on here, so I'd probably put them down and put some tape on there, but I will cover the individual soldered joints with our liquid tape. This one happens to be white that I grabbed. There we have it. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this back on top of the spire. Now for our final test, we'll look at the board that we have on top of the spire. It's all wired up. I've straightened out the wires a little bit, and we have our liquid tape on top of the bare spots that are on there. So everything's hooked up and it looks like it's working. If you notice, we have a blue LED on the remote control that tells me that we have power going to the remote control. We're going to pick up the remote control and we'll go over here to our fan and we'll go ahead and hit the light, and the LEDs on the light are on. We'll hit the second button and our fan comes on. I've already adjusted it so that it should slow down to a very slow speed. And if we hit our third button, it'll go to high speed on the fan. Hit that button again and it'll slowly slow down to the slow speed. And of course we can run the fan with or without the light being on. So you want a little more ambiance in the room, we just turn the light off.